Hello and welcome to the Government Relations and Advocacy panel for the AHA Awareness Day. I would like to welcome everybody who's participating. I'm James Romano. I'm Legislative Coordinator for the WAHA Warriors. I have with me today Mr. Dane Christiansen uh, from the Health and Medicine Council, one of the WAHA Warriors lobbyists in Washington, who is going to provide us with a Washington update. We're very excited. Dane is one of the most well-respected lobbyists in Washington, D.C., and he knows more than anybody else on the current situation with healthcare programs and the budget and what's going on in Capitol Hill. So thank you, Dane, for being with us today.
Thank you, Jim, for that introduction. I'm just going to share my screen quick. I've got a few slides for everybody. And if it'll let me go into the slideshow, we'll be in good shape. All right. Well, everyone, thank you for having me here. Looking forward to hearing more from Jim about Awareness Day. I'm happy to give a Washington update. We do have well-maintained advocacy efforts. When you're a rare disease community, it's very important that you maintain a presence on Capitol Hill, that members know who you are, they know about your condition, they know how they can help. Education and awareness are always important. They're very important, though, when folks might not have any information about who you are, or your challenges and opportunities, and then, of course, where they can be helpful. So, members make a lot of healthcare decisions, how much for research, what to do with patient care, coverage, access, out-of-pocket costs. They can make these decisions with your input or without it. We always prefer they make it with your input. So normally we provide a Washington update at the start of the year, but this year I think we're going to call it What's Going On in Washington and try and make sense of it all. So if you'll bear with me for about the next 10 minutes, I'm happy to give a timely update. So really quick, there's a number of things that have been in the news, and I think folks know November of last year, we had an election and we elected a new Congress. So Congress ended, the last Congress, the 118th Congress, ended on December 20th of 2024. The new Congress, the 119th Congress, everyone that got elected or reelected convened on January 3rd and got to work on a number of items. It was a presidential election year. We had an inauguration on January 20th. Donald Trump was the first person since I think Grover Cleveland to do 2 terms as president. So he was the 45th president and now the 47th president. And I mention that because when someone was president before, you kind of get a sense of how they do business and what they're all about. And some lessons from Trump 45. This is just advocacy information. A lot of stuff calibrated for kind of headline consumption, the news cycle, but not everything, calibrated for policy change. And I mention that because it seems like there's been an awful lot going on lately. I'll try to put that in context for coverage, access, and out-of-pocket costs. So first, on the administration side, there has been a number of executive orders. And I'm going to mention this from an advocacy perspective again. Executive orders aren't a great way to make policy. There's kind of a so shall it be written, so shall it be done style, but that's not really how it works. Lots of executive orders aren't worth the paper they're written on. One of the first executive orders had to do with birthright citizenship. And I'm not going to get political, but I'm just going to mention, this from how the system works. Citizenship is determined in the Constitution, and changing it would require a constitutional amendment. So saying you're changing it by executive order looks great, but it doesn't do a whole lot. And this is when the courts get involved to call balls and strikes. How is this happening? And I think people know the best way to change policy or to make policy or change the law is by engaging senators and representatives. A bill passes the Senate, passes the House, gets signed by the president. That is a policy change that's permanent. And that's how the system works. So Congress is really the ones who are making a lot of these changes. The administration is kind of outlining their priorities and seeing what sticks right now. So there were a number of announcements early on. One was an executive order freezing communications that said, we're going to take a pause. We're going to see how our forward-facing presence looks. We're going to take down websites and information. And, we're going to redo all this and don't talk to the stakeholders or Congress in the meantime. Congress is very quick to say, oh, hold on a second. We have oversight authority, so you have to respond to us if we ask you something. And this was given a little latitude by the courts because you do have time to say, how you want to do things. And you could take these information portals and public-facing databases down temporarily, but you couldn't take them down indefinitely. And now many of them have already, come back. The communications freeze has thawed. The next thing that happened was there was a federal funding executive order that came out that said we're going to reevaluate all and freeze all federal funding. Constitutionally, Congress has the power of the purse. I'll mention that this was not coordinated with Capitol Hill. Many members were, including Republicans, were at a retreat at Mar-a-Lago, didn't know this was coming, and started getting phone calls from their state governors and defense contractors saying, what's going on? Or what about our money? Is the government really not going to pay us? And within a matter of hours, because members, senators, and representatives have been calling the White House, this was already getting pulled back. It was, it said, oh, big misunderstanding. We're not freezing all federal funding. And then after that, they released a different set of executive orders that said, we're going to fund things that conform with presidential values. Of course, in America, we have free speech, equal protection. And of course, if you have a contract, a grant, or a cooperative agreement, it functions the same way a contract exists between any two people. And you can't just change that, on a whim. So a lot of this has been tied up in court, and courts saying what can or cannot be done with these different, kind of designs. And then the most recent one was NIH research. We're going to change how research at the National Institutes of Health gets funded. That one was held up in court within hours of being released, and there's a reason for this. Congress decides how much money goes to research and where it goes every year through the spending bills. This is why we advocate with them. And there's even a section in the spending bills called Section 224 right now that says you can't change, how research is paid for and what the academic institutions are doing. That's set by Congress. And it even says, and the administration can't change it. So if you are the administration, you can make policy anywhere there isn't a law or it's unclear. But when you have a law that's been passed by Congress for close to 10 years now, and it's approved and it's enacted and it says, we set the rate and the administration can't change it, a judge is going to be hard pressed to come up with a different conclusion. But a lot of that stuff that you're seeing in the news is all dealt with between the administrations and the courts. It's very different from the process that's going on Capitol Hill with our lawmakers. And that includes a lot of the DOJ efficiency activities too. These are happening for headlines. And I think people see federal workers get terminated, then they get rehired. It's a very confusing paradigm right now. But a lot of that doesn't happen in the realm where we're engaging with Capitol Hill to talk about medical research, public health, and patient care needs. And every member of Congress works for their constituents. They're looking to you and what you think to make policy, and they continue to work together on a number of bipartisan initiatives. Right now, Congress is working on funding for fiscal year 2025. The federal fiscal year starts October 1st. Congress almost never has their work done by October 1st. They usually finish their work in December as they're getting ready to leave for the holidays and adjourn. Last year, they had a big bill ready on December 20th. It included a whole bunch of stuff. It included letting kids in Medicaid see doctors across state lines easier. It included a bunch of research programs. It reauthorized the Pediatric Priority Review Voucher Program. It fixed Medicare physician reimbursement. It included telehealth extensions. And the reason it had so much stuff in it was because the 118th Congress didn't do a whole lot. They had a bunch of backlogged work. They tried to throw it all in the end of the year package. And unfortunately, that package fell apart at the 11th hour. They ended up passing what's called a continuing resolution. They punted everything until March 14th, the day that this recording is taking place. And they're trying to finish that process off right now. So the House has passed an FY25 funding bill. It basically level funds everything. NIH, medical research, patient care, public health, all level funded at FY24 levels. Folks will say, well, geez, this is actually a little bit of a cut because it doesn't include, inflation, and it forgoes additional money that Congress had been talking about spending. But in an environment where everyone's saying, geez, where do we create efficiency and where do we cut? Level funding is not the worst thing that could happen. One exception, the military research program, which is much smaller than NIH and other programs, takes about a 50% cut. So we're not sure if that's going to stick. The Senate still has to vote on the bill. They might want to address that, but that's where we're at right now. And Congress has already started on fiscal year 26. How much money for research, how much for patient care, how much for the FBI, how much for the Department of Agriculture. This is a member-driven process. Members are driven by their constituents. They're looking for your input, but just because they took longer to finish FY25 doesn't mean they get to delay starting FY26. The fiscal year will still start on October 1st. They have to do the FY26 bill. So they're asking for patient stories. They're asking for information, and we hope that this is a process that you, as an advocate and a warrior, will participate in. There's also something going on called budget reconciliation. This is where you've heard about the potential for cuts to Medicaid, CHIP, SNAP, WIC, student loans. The government is trying to come up with top line numbers, income and expenses, and balance that out and spend less money on what they call entitlement programs. But where these cuts happen and how they happen is a member-driven process too. So if you don't think the government should cut Medicaid or WIC or SNAP, now would be the time to tell your lawmakers about it. They're going to make decisions off of this. They don't have to pass a budget reconciliation bill. If they can't do it, though, they just simply won't do it. Nothing will change. The system will stay as it is. Congress was working on a number of things last year related to healthcare. A big one was PBM, or pharmacy benefit manager reform, adding transparency to the healthcare system, restoring patient choice and physician-patient directed care. That was fobbed over, so it's going to be picked up in earnest now in the 119th Congress again with other bills like the Safe Step Act, prior authorization, the Help Co-Pays Act, that are all being reintroduced despite being very popular in the last Congress. They're also looking at reauthorizing the National Institutes of Health and reorganizing the CDC to see if we can modernize the agencies. And they're working on something called Cures 2.1, which says, is healthcare good right now at translating breakthroughs in science to FDA-approved treatment options and then coverage and access at CMS? Is that system moving quickly? Are there delays? Are there things that are disrupting patient care, particularly for folks with rare diseases? So, what's going on right now today? What are the big 30,000-foot level items? I'll mention a few things. The House has been working on these funding bills. The Senate has needed to confirm agency leadership. So we have a new Secretary of HHS. We just confirmed a Secretary of the Department of Labor, and now they've moved on to different agency heads. The Senate Help Committee just reported out the new NIH director. The full Senate will have to vote on that. They reported out the new FDA director. The full Senate will have to vote on that. And they pulled the nomination for the CDC director. They thought the guy was too extreme. They're going to come up with a new nominee. So this is where the Senate has been working in addition to managing other things. And when these new agency heads come in, we'll start to get a sense of what their priorities are and what they think should be done. And they'll have to work with Congress, of course, to secure funding or guidance or other instructions on what they can do. They do this through testimony, they do it through input, and the same way the community is asked to provide input. Another thing that's notable for the 119th Congress is that there's 65 new members of the House. About right now, there's going to be more. Others will be leaving. We've already had a couple of folks depart the House. So there'll be other special elections, other new members, but today there's 65 new members. There's only 435 total members of the House. So close to 15% of the House is brand new. These are folks that probably have no familiarity with rare diseases, probably no familiarity with our community. Educating and talking to them is very important. And there's 10 new senators. There's only 100 senators total, so 10% of the Senate is brand new senators. Same thing on the Senate side. You want these folks to be champions. You want them to know who you are. You want them to be able to work for you, regardless of their politics. The issues we work on are nonpartisan. Our biggest opposition is simply a lack of information and education. People don't know what they can do to be helpful. Other thing that's notable here is that we didn't lose a bunch of freshmen. It wasn't swing district folks. Oh, this year it was a Democrat, next year it's a Republican, and it goes back and forth. We lost a lot of senior committee leaders and senior leadership. So there's been a changing of the guard. New leadership is in place. People know Mitch McConnell, longtime Senate leader, stepped back. But other folks, Kathy McMorris Rogers, who led the Energy and Commerce Committee, retired. New leader of the Energy and Commerce Committee, Brett Guthrie. Kay Granger, longtime leader on appropriations, retired. Tom Cole, new leader on appropriations, stepped up. So there's been a lot of big changes. And one of those changes is that the sponsor of the Help Co-Pays Act in the House, Buddy Carter from Georgia, is now chairing the subcommittee. So, even many supporters have now become senior leaders, and they need other folks that are now new members to become supporters and champions as well. We're waiting on bill reintroductions. Of course, if a bill doesn't pass in the last Congress, it has to start the process over, but it keeps a lot of the support that it had. It doesn't go back to zero. Key bills that are patient care related are the Safe Step Act, which is to provide guardrails in step therapy so that you can't be switched on products without knowing about it and your doctor can overrule an insurance company's decision. The Help Copays Act, which I just mentioned, which says if you get assistance paying for your pharmacy benefit, that's going to be counted to your out-of-pocket maximum. They can't take the payment and then say, oh, and you still owe us more money. It's kind of double dipping, but this would rein in that practice. And they're trying to do prior authorization reform. The prior authorization reform bill had 350 co-sponsors in the last Congress, nearly everyone co-sponsoring it, but that just shows you how little they got done. The new Congress is going to have to take this over the goal line, and they're going to need to set those priorities and hear that these things still matter to their constituents, particularly those new members. They are accepting submissions on the appropriations process, guidance on funding for specific conditions, and I'll talk about that a little later, and how much should go where, how much for research, how much for public health, how much for patient care. And just when you think that Congress can't work together, everything seems so divisive, they don't agree, everything is a partisan fight, that's only what gets reported in the news. Every day, Congress works on bills where they all agree it's a good idea, and they all come together to vote for it. A bill that they just passed this week was called the Chronic Disease Flexible Coverage Act. It passed the House unanimously. It meant to provide coverage and health savings accounts for things that folks with chronic diseases might need. So even when they're in front of the cameras saying they can't get along for political reasons, they do regularly pass bills together, like the chronic disease bill or like the prior auth bill, where everyone agrees it's a good idea. The system and the process still works, whether it's appropriations or simply legislating. The community has a voice, and we've managed to influence these processes. Most notably, when they've done the funding bills, they've recognized the need to do more for WAHA and the hemolytic anemia community through the spending bills and through these programs. So in addition to providing money for research, like the National Heart, Lung, Blood Institute, or money for public health, like the Rare Blood Disorders Program, they've also said we need these agencies to do more for WAHA. This is language from the actual recent spending bills, including the one that they're considering right now, that says you have to do more work in this area. Look forward to working with the agencies to bolster research, public health, and patient care for this community. And it's a process that we recommend continuing to engage in. But the members only included this because they know constituents are affected. And they said, this is what the condition does for me and my family, and this is how you can help. And this is my story. And that's what allows this to happen. There are a few things that we're focused on this year. There are big issues like NIH funding and funding for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and coverage access and out-of-pocket costs that we not only work on, but many communities work on. So hundreds, if not thousands, of patient groups and professional societies will be saying more money for research, more money for the CDC, and address these coverage issues. The NIH number for FY26 is already known. The community is going to be requesting about a $4 billion increase. That might sound like a lot of money, but NIH has about a $48 billion budget right now. It has to study every single condition, Alzheimer's, ALS, et cetera, et cetera. So, and right now they have something called a pay line, which is about 10%, which says 1 in 10 grant applications from scientists get funded. That's good, but we should be doing a lot better. If 1 in 20 grants was being funded, we'd have a lot more progress more quickly in research. And for a rare disease community, every one of those additional grants matters. So what are we working on specifically that not only is that broader chorus, but what we can do just for us? One is something at the CDC called the Chronic Disease Education and Awareness Program. This program funds grants with different patient groups that would specifically work in condition-specific areas. So you can apply for funding, not unlike the NIH, and say, this is a 3-year public health project that we need to do, and the CDC can fund those. I believe there's a pending project for our community, and they're waiting on that funding increase coming from the CDC. And if there's a funding increase, they will fund those approved grants. So we have a chance to have a CDC project as long as this account and this funding increases. We can be one of those as there's additional resources, they fund more research, we would be one of those programs. Another thing we're working on this year is funding through the DoD research program. So there's something called the Peer-Reviewed Medical Research Program, which has what's called an eligible conditions list. So every year, senators write a list of conditions that are deemed eligible for study through the DoD. It makes them have access to about $300 million in funding. This is a program right now that's not treated very well in this House bill that's going to pass. There's about a 50% cut. But the reality is, whether the program's funded at 370 million or 200 million, you can't apply for research funding if you're not on the list. 2 senators have to put you on the list, and you have to have a military service connection. Senators are going to put us on the list because they've heard from constituents that we want to be there. And we do have a military service connection. There are numbers of information about autoimmune and acquired hemolytic anemias that have to do with military service and other conditions like hepatitis C that disproportionately affect veterans. So we can be included in this program, but we have to ask for it. And then, of course, we want to educate new members. We want to raise awareness, like with these awareness activities, and we want to engage and create new champions so we have a critical mass of support on Capitol Hill. And your voice matters in all of that. And with that being said, I'm going to hand things back over to Jim.
Thank you, Dane. That was very informative, and we are very lucky to be working with you. I want to just go over some of the items that we've done in the past year that the Waha Warriors have been involved with. One of the great one of the great items that Dane has gotten the Waha Warriors involved in is the NHLBI constituency group, and that really provides a platform to learn what is happening over the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, and it gives an opportunity for Waha to interact with the leadership over at NHLBI. It provides the Warriors with a voice in advocacy with the constituency group. And so I know Karen has been attending the meetings, and it's something that the Warriors have been working with. Also, Karen was able to attend the Women's Caucus event last year, where she met with several members of Congress, Kat Kamarack from Florida, Nancy Pelosi, the former Speaker of the House, and Amelia Sykes from Democratic member from Ohio. And so I know it was a very important meeting for her and to enjoy and a fun night and to share a picture taken with several of the members. We hosted our second annual Advocacy Day on Capitol Hill in October. We brought 3 teams of patient and patient advocates to Washington. We had approximately 30 meetings with many different congressional offices. We had people from Illinois, Ohio, New Jersey, New York. So it was an excellent day. We worked on the issues that Dane just talked about, and we look forward to hopefully the future at some point in the future of doing this again. One final note, one activities that we will be working towards is putting together a campaign to work towards obtaining awareness proclamations from states and training you how to get them on the local government. We submitted requests for AHA Awareness Day from the governor of Ohio and the governor of Virginia, and we'll be updating you at the annual meeting as to basically how to do this. So I want to thank everybody for participating. Thank you, Dane. Thank you, HMC, for all the work that you're doing. And we look forward to working with everybody in the future. Thank you very much, and have a great rest of AHA Awareness Day.